So here's a question a lot of people grapple with. Is there a light at the end of the tunnel? I was recently asked this about someone's narcissistic relationship. It happened to be a marriage. And I was asked by one of the people in the marriage, is there a light at the end of the tunnel? I found it to be a really interesting question because I wasn't sure what she meant. She clarified, and what she was asking, she was meaning was that she was asking me, would it get easier and more normal? And in her case, probably not. She wanted the marriage to change and get healthier and easier and smoother, and that just wasn't going to happen with this particular partner. But that left me thinking about this sort of proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. What does that mean in an unhealthy, manipulative, unsafe relationship that is not going to change that much? And have you been holding out for this so-called light at the end of the tunnel? And what has that meant to you? After she said that to me, I stopped and thought about past and present narcissistic or toxic relationships and what the so-called light at the end of the tunnel would be in these various situations. In one, it would be that the person would listen and stop thinking they always had the right answer because they were so stubborn in believing that they were right. They would make very expensive mistakes I have to keep fixing. In another case, that the person would listen to me and have empathy for me when I was going through a tough time instead of being critical when I couldn't get everything done as quickly as they wanted. For me, the light at the end of the tunnel in these relationships that I can't get out of, the light at the end of the tunnel was that these people in these relationships would become more self-aware and more circumspect and less selfish. Now, one of the people is old, one of the people is younger. For the older person, I gave up on the light a long time ago. For the younger person, I have radically accepted and stopped explaining myself and disengaged a bit. So maybe the question really becomes, what is your light at the end of the tunnel? For the married woman I was chatting with, that was not happening. She was bummed out when she heard that. At least the light she wanted was not going to be turned on. In the stuff I spoke about in myself, I held on for years to what I thought was the light I hoped for at the end of the tunnel. And when in one case it was very clear that that was never going to happen, I really got sort of swept up in the grief work, and it has hurt and shaped and cost me. And with the other, again, more radical acceptance and giving up on what I hoped things would be. The light, in essence, was created by shifts on my side, and that may be it. For that married woman, it's harder because the light for her entirely had to do with his behavior. By definition, a light at the end of the tunnel is about hope. The idea that you may now be in darkness, but it will get better. That you will see the end of this thing. The end may mean the end of the problematic behavior in the relationship, and we know that hope is a tricky thing in narcissistic relationships. Hope is the idea that just keep walking through the darkness, you'll get to the light. The so-called light at the end of the tunnel is a sort of a future fake that we do to ourselves. It's terrible now, it has been terrible, but there's got to be a light coming. And there is the belief that the light at the end of the tunnel implies that you are, in essence, out of the tunnel and things will stay better. Not likely. And waiting for the light at the end of the tunnel means that you endure the stuff that you're enduring on the hope that it will change. How would it feel different if you were enduring this stuff in this relationship and most of it won't change? That the person in this relationship would not be nicer or more regulated or more aware or less selfish. We can link this idea of the light at the end of the tunnel to time and events. For example, people saying, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel once the holidays are over, once summer begins, once tax season passes, once she gets out of school, once the kids are older, once they retire. Nope. Because unless the things that are problematic about a relationship are solely linked to these events or circumstances. For example, you're an accountant, and once tax season is over, you will literally be working fewer hours, or once the children are older, you could do something like move to a smaller house in a more affordable area, then this isn't true. The selfishness or the lack of self-awareness or the manipulation are not just going to stop because it's January. Some things in life may be less stressful for sure. If they retire, they may not grouse about work as much, but a new set of problems may come in. For example, they may not feel important anymore, or money now may become more of an issue. And while the minor stressors that were triggers in your relationship may evaporate, or house guests may leave, the fundamental issues in the narcissistic relationship are not going to go away with the simple passage of time. The core issues will remain. In some cases, the light at the end of the tunnel metaphor works because the toxic relationship, by definition, is time limited. For example, a toxic roommate situation that's for 1 year, or a job that you can leave, or being a bridesmaid in a toxic bride's wedding. It may feel gross while you're in it and may very much be taking a real toll, but the toxic thing has a true end to it. And then you can make decisions about it. And finally, the interesting thing is that while the narcissistic person's behavior is so consistent over time and really quite unchanging, everything else in your life does shift. We get older, society changes, children get older, people pass on, jobs change, people get sick, people get better, we learn new things. All that change is happening alongside you being in a relationship with a person who really doesn't change. So some of the light in that tunnel is created by the idea that things that seemed so permanent change, because that's what life and growth and evolution are all about. So it stands to reason that we would believe that some kind of change would be possible in a narcissistic person as well, because everything else changes. So maybe the healing work is figuring out what light at the end of the tunnel would work for you. In my experience, the light at the end of the tunnel cannot be about changing another person's personality or behavior, but instead has to be linked to you. And this can include things like waiting for children to get over the age of 18 to make decisions about how you will proceed in a relationship. The children will get over the age of 18. That's a little bit of a light, and you'll be making decisions in a different way. Or maybe you are slowly working on a degree or certification in something that will allow you to be employed and to earn your own money, so then you might be in a better position to distance yourself from a narcissistic relationship. Or maybe after retirement, there'll be a move to a smaller place in a region where you actually do have more social support through friends or family. And then there's the radical acceptance part of the light at the end of the tunnel. And this doesn't really feel like a light per se, but rather you are your own light. And the more you get it and learn about it, the brighter it gets. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And you then realize that the light at the end of the tunnel is that you do not take it as personally. You're building up social supports. You may be in therapy to address issues like trauma and healing. You're finding more meaning and purpose in things in life that are separate from the narcissistic person. The light, frankly, becomes you, and not about a someday when things get better, or the narcissistic person changes. When you think about the so-called light at the end of the tunnel, be clear on what it means, what you're waiting for. Is it a dreamy future where the narcissistic people in your life are chill and insightful and well-regulated and sweet and kind and self-aware? Then no. It's going to be an eternally dark tunnel. Or is the light at the end of the tunnel? Are they the shifts in yourself and maybe the stuff of life changing, people growing and moving on and shifting? Then yes, there is a light. But when it becomes about the hope that this relationship can change and the narcissistic person's behavior can change and that there is a light at the end of this tunnel, not really. Healing isn't about abolishing hope. It's about shifting and moving and housing the hope in yourself and in the awareness that everything in life changes, just strangely, not their narcissistic behavior. And ultimately, the light at the end of the tunnel is that you will not always feel this way. Because once you get it, you get how these relationships work, and start taking even tentative steps towards healing, that's the light, and you will feel differently. And it may not be the light you wanted it to be, but it's light nonetheless. Thanks again.